Hello, we're back again for My Louisiana Sky Chapter 5. This chapter is a pivotal chapter in the book here. You're really going to get a look at the relationship between Tiger and her mom. Now, we obviously know that mom, slightly embarrassing, is kind of has the mind of a child, the mind of a kindergartner. And I bet there's been moments in your life when maybe your mom or dad has embarrassed you. I know I can think of countless times when my good old mother, God bless her, as much as I love her, she embarrassed me. But let's read about this in chapter 5, and if we have time, we might add a quick story at the end here. Mama, Jessie Wade, and I floated on inner tubes at Seda Creek with our legs dangling over the rubber and our feet dripping in the cold water. It was mid-June, and the day was hotter than the 4th of July. My hand shaded my eyes from the sun as I watched clouds dance from the tips of the trees towering above us, and I listened to the grasshoppers chirping loudly in the tall grass. "Watch this," Mama said in her high voice. To my horror, she plopped into the creek and ducked her head under the water. "No, Mama!" I yelled. Granny had told us not to get our hair wet since we were going to the bookmobile today. I waited a second, but Mama didn't bounce back up. The air left my lungs like someone had slapped it out of me. I jumped into the water, reaching, trying to feel for one of Mama's arms or legs. Anything. But I touched nothing. Now I was afraid from more than Granny's scolding. "Jesse, wait, do something quick," I screamed, splashing water on him and beginning to wake him from his doze. He shook his head and opened his eyes. "What?" "It's my mama. She's gone under the water." "Well, she always comes back up." "Well, she ain't come up yet." "Help me." He dove into the creek and swam under the water toward the other end. Mama's empty inner tube floated lazily on the surface. I kept my arms stretched out, grabbed them with my hands, but I only captured creek water. My heart pounded so fast I thought it would leap clear from my chest. Just as Jessie Wade's head bobbed above the surface, I decided to dunk mine under. And I heard Mama's giggle behind me. Here I am, she chanted, holding on to the inner tube. Her wet stringy hair didn't hide her beauty. Her cheeks looked kissed by the sun, and her eyes sparkled like sunbeams dancing on the water. Finally, when she stopped laughing, she said, "Bet you can't do that." I sighed with relief. "Oh, Mama, Granny's going to skin us alive." But I was so thankful to see her breathing, I hugged her. She hugged me back and then said, "Want to see what old Clem does when he takes a swim?" Clem was Jessie Wade's hound dog. Before I could answer, she shook her head over and over, her wet locks spitting water at me. Hey, quit it, Mama!" She giggled and Jessie Wade laughed. Then she stopped and stared something past us. "Hi, Ma," Mama said. Jessie Wade rolled off his inner tube. Hi, Miss Jewel." I whipped around. Granny stood on the creek bank, frowning with 2 towels in her hands. Mama kept grinning. "Look, Ma, you want to see what old Clem does after a swim?" she repeated, her shaking act, but this time no one laughed. "Come here, Corina," Granny said. "Let's get you dried off before you can't get to the bookmobile with wet hair." She looked at me. "Believe I told you that earlier." Mama stepped forward and Granny tossed a towel to me. She threw the other one over Mama's head, then rubbed it viciously. "Ow, Ma!" Mama cried. "That hurts." Granny continued rubbing. "Maybe you'll remember next time I tell you not to wet your hair. Now get on to the house and get dressed." Mama headed home singing, "How much is that doggy in the window?" She disappeared behind the bush, but we could still hear her. "Roof, roof." "I'm so sorry, Granny," I said. "She went under before I could do anything." Granny's face softened into a smile. Not a big smile, because that wasn't her way, but a smile just the same. "Oh, don't fret," she said. "Except you better get back to change too, lest you won't both be going with dripping hair. Jessie Wade, you tell your mama to say hello for me. And your daddy, those purple hulls were mighty good." She turned and walked away. Yes, ma'am. I sure will. Yes, ma'am. Jessie Wade looked relieved as I felt. A half hour later, Mama and I walked to the bookmobile parked outside the Cedar Creek School gym. As we walked over, we took turns kicking a rock, a game we often played to make the 2 miles go quicker. Once inside the bookmobile, I checked out Little Women for the second time, as Mama looked through the picture books. Hannah stood in the back browsing at Jane Eyre. She wore a new cast on her arm. A few months ago, she had claimed her ribs had broken from a fall, but I wondered if that was true what everybody said about her daddy beating her. When she saw me staring at her, she frowned. That's a good book, I said. Read it last summer. She put it back on the shelf and selected another. I quickly turned my head to look out another window. Abby Lynn, Dolly, Annette, and Jackie were going inside the gym. I glanced back at Mama. She kept looking over each book like the other mothers select the best pork chops. She held a book in each hand, her eyes looking from left to right. Over and over again, she would be there until the bookmobile had to drive away. I sneaked outside and slipped into the gym. Some of the boys, including Jessie Wade, played basketball, while Abby Lynn and the other girls stood near the bleachers. They formed a circle, leaving me on the outside as Abby Lynn flipped through a Sears Roebuck catalog. They all wore matching saddle Oxfords and barrettes in their bobbed hair. I wondered what I might look like with saddle Oxfords on my feet with a bobbed hairdo. Abby Lynn pointed to something in the catalog pages. I like this swimming suit with the ruffle. Ooh, yes, said the other girls together. Abby Lynn closed the catalog. You know, my daddy says when the swimming pool's finished, I can have a swimming party. I'm going to invite everybody I know. She looked at me when she said that. My heart pounded. Then I heard, Tiger! Tiger! Mama was calling me. Her loud sobs rose above the murmurs in the crowded gym. People stopped talking and stared across the room at Mama. Even Jessie Wade stopped dribbling. Mama stood with her feet wide apart, holding her purse in one hand and a picture book in the other. Her wet hair was still damp from the swim, and red lipstick smeared past the edges of her mouth. The girls giggled. My face burned like a kerosene lamp. I wished I could slither into a crack in the wall. Tiger, your mama's looking for you. Abby Lynn's blonde curls bounced for the rhythm of each word she spoke. Dolly closed her lips and frowned, covering the big gap between her two front teeth. Why, Tiger Parker, did you go off and leave your mama by herself? Shame on you. The other girls snickered. My body froze as I looked at the scratched wood floor. I should have waved my arm high and said, Here, Mama, here I am. Instead, I kept still and wished I could be invisible. Could this really be happening? Maybe it was a dream. But it was no dream. Mama's outburst probably ruined any chance of any invitation to that swimming party. People divided up as if Mama were Moses parting the Red Sea. Her black patent leather purse gaped open at the handle as it rested in the crook of her arm. She looked around, scoping out the gym. My heart pounded like a drum. Finally, her eyes met mine, and she raced toward me, grabbed me, and wrapped her sweaty arms around my waist, her cheek pressed against mine. Here you are, Tiger! Here you are! Abby Lynn whispered in Dolly's ear, and the other girls giggled. Mama squeezed me. Her hair covered my face. I thought I lost you, and I didn't know where lost and found was. Abby Lynn smothered her laughter, covering her mouth with her hand. I was doomed. But I couldn't blame Mama for saying it. Once when I was 4, I got lost shopping with her at Penny's. Then Granny taught us to go to the first lost and found department if it happened again. Mama had cried then too. Tiger, please don't play hide and seek. I don't like that game. The girls backed away from us, leaving Mama and me in our own little circle. Every person in the gym stared at us as if we were performing a play. I noticed Jesse Wade from across the room. When my gaze reached his, he looked down at the floor. Then he lifted his head and smiled at me. "Come on, Mama. Let's go home." I glanced at the girls quickly on the way out. When we left the gym to walk back home. Minnie and Abner, whose father Otis worked with Daddy at the nursery, strolled past the schoolyard and waved to us. Minnie wore her hair in a dozen braids. Each one had a red ribbon tied around the end. She and Abner were probably going to the colored school to meet the bookmobile there. Mama held her book, The Little Engine That Could, in one hand and swung her purse with the other as she kicked a rock with the scuffed toe of her Sunday shoe. "Your turn." "No thanks," I grumbled. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I don't feel like it." "But you kick rocks when we walk to school. Why don't you all play now?" "Because I don't feel like it," I shouted. Mama didn't have the sense to know why I was angry. My anger surprised her as well as me. I never yelled at Mama. Her face wrinkled up like one of the toddlers of the church nursery. "But you're mad at me. Why are you mad at me?" I didn't speak because I didn't know what to say. I felt shameful and odd, as though the thoughts running through my head belonged to someone else. I wish I hadn't gone inside the gym. I wish I hadn't seen Abby Lynn and the other girls, but most of all, for the first time, I wish Mama wasn't my Mama. She cried and tried to touch my arm, but I shrugged it away. "You are mad at me. What did I do?" I hunched my shoulders. "Mama, why'd you have to go hugging on me at the gym?" She stopped walking and gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth as her huge brown eyes grew larger. "Did I squeeze you too tight?" "Oh, forget it." I started to walk again. Mama followed. Her head hung low like she'd been punished. Guilt swallowed me whole. How could I ever cheer her up? I kicked a rock. "Your turn, Mama." She giggled, shaking off her sad mood like old Clem shaking off a swim. "Hold these," she said, handing the book and purse to me. She spotted the stone ahead of her and backed up. Puffing out her cheeks, she pushed off with one foot and ran a few steps. Her foot kicked that stone so hard it flew toward the sky until it crashed into our mailbox. She brushed her hands together and smiled. "Bet you can't do that." "No, Mama, I bet I can't." I followed Mama up the winding path to our home. The midday sun peeked between the towering pine trees, and its heat beat down on my body. I thought about how nice it might feel to be invited to Abby Lynn's swimming party and go swimming in a real swimming pool. So what about you? Have you ever been embarrassed by your mom like Tiger was embarrassed there at the bookmobile? I have to say, I got to tell you about a moment when I was embarrassed by my mother, God bless her. So I was in football in high school, and I wasn't the best player by any means, but I remember we had a mother-son football clinic that my coach had put on. And the coach had lined up the boys on one side and their moms were straight across from him. And we were supposed to teach our moms how to correctly do a tackle. And my mom was straight across from me. And I'm looking at my mom, and there my mom is staring back at me, and she is crouched down in this really awkward stance like she's trying to get ready to tackle me, right? And she starts growling over there. And she starts going, "Rrrr, sometimes they growl. Sometimes they growl." And I'm like, oh my gosh. My buddies were around me. They were so laughing at me. And it's a good thing that there wasn't any swimming parties that week for me, because I certainly would not have been invited. But anyways, I love you, Mom, if you're listening to this. That was certainly a moment when I was slightly embarrassed by it, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and close it off here. We're coming down to the last few seconds, so hopefully you enjoyed Chapter 5 of My Louisiana Sky, and we're going to pick up with Chapter 6 next.